Hey everyone, it's Types, and in the Pokemon TCG, supporters that draw you cards are crucial in the game because they just get you more cards, which is important. I mean, it's a card game. You need cards to play, and supporters are stronger than item cards in the fact that they do more. I mean, you look at a an item card like Pokemon Catcher, I think is still in standard. This card is not that good. It's playable and it's half of a boss's orders. Boss's orders does the same thing, except you flip a coin. Obviously, there's more to these cards. An item card is a card that you can play as many of as you want per turn, but you can play one support every turn. You want to be playing that supporter card every turn. You want to have a good chunk of supporters to let you actually do that. And again, you want them to draw you more cards because drawing more cards is good. And supporters do really one of two things. They either, one, draw you cards, or I guess set you up could be included there as well, or two, they do utility. Utility is a few different things. To be honest, it's mostly boss's orders, but it's more important to set up than to have some fun utility options. So utility options are nice, but they're more useful once you have going what you need to have going there, right? So boss orders is very good and is one of the best support cards in the game, but I think Liz's Determination is a lot better, which is the main draw supporter, and as I mentioned as well, setup supporter. There are other good supporters for setting up, but most of those are search supporters. Those are things like Hilda or something like Brock Scouting, something like Dawn. Cards like this, they are not bad cards, but they just search for Pokemon. I mean, technically, Hilda also searches for energies, which is useful, and there are different ones that search for slightly different things. And of course, also Pokemon can get you other cards, but they don't do this in a truly amazing way. They'll kind of struggle to get you a bit of a variety of resources, unlike regular draw supporters like Liz Determination, which really will be getting you a bit of everything most of the time. Obviously, not literally all the time, but it is still ultimately a card that is, I mean, it's very good. And if you play the Pokemon TCG, you know that this card is just crazy good and a card that you probably would play it as maybe an 8 of if you could. Tell me actually in the comment section how many copies you'd play of Lilies if you could play as many as you want. I think that's a really interesting discussion there. But regardless, Lilies Determination is by far the best. After that, though, everyone that I've been playing with some, which is actually on this list. If you know my channel, you probably know what it is, and you know that I think it's very good. But I have 5 here today that are definitely worth running and trying out in decks. I've played with, I guess I played with all of them. One of these I've really not played with much at all. And I'll give you some context on each of them. But again, playing draw supporters is oftentimes going to be better than playing search supporters, and I'd recommend you try it out as well. But regardless, let's just hop right in here with the first card here, Amarys. Amarys is definitely the one that I'm the least familiar with of the ones on this list, and the one that I believe has seen the least play. Looking at Limitless's like quote major competitive tournaments, we don't see it played at all, and we look at in these online city league tournaments, which are relatively small local tournaments, not like tiny, but they're just they're I guess I'd say medium-sized tournaments there, and you're going to see a lot of cards played in these, or I guess performing decently in these, and this card is not really doing that. So what this card does is, if you're not familiar, which I don't blame you, it's actually from Prismatic Evolutions. That's the only set it's in, despite being mostly a reprint set, and it's a supporter saying that you draw 4 cards, which is pretty solid, I will say. Generally, when you look at supporters that get you cards, obviously some search for specific cards and don't get you too many cards. I guess Dawn searches for specific cards and gets you 3, but a lot of times you're not getting crazy value out of all 3, but you are still getting 3 cards, which is nice. And then you look at other supporters that are, draw supporters. Obviously, Liz Determination gets you a lot of cards, but it does lose your hand. That is something definitely worth noting. You get, 6 or 8 new cards there, so it is very good. But you're getting, we'll say 6 cards. So, shuffle draw 6 is still good, and for a bunch of the game, it will be shuffle draw 6. Amarys is just a draw 4 here. There's a downside, which I will talk about. Obviously, that's very meaningful. But this is the most simple straight draw supporter where, well, I don't know if it's the simplest, but in terms of when you play it, it's the simplest. You just play it, you just draw 4 cards, and drawing 4 cards is interesting. I don't know if draw 4 on its own exactly how good it would be. I've heard people say it would be broken. I've heard people say it would be just not that good. But regardless, we have draw 3 in the game. It's not good. If you played with a draw 3 supporter, you know it's probably not good. But draw 4, I think, is pretty all right, getting you a good chunk of cards there. And It's okay. Oh, I do also want to mention, I normally don't talk about costs of cards, but this card's 2 cents. It's literally the cheapest trainer card in the game, according to Limitless. So, which I guess I believe is according to TCG Player as well. So it's like it's so cheap, right? This card is so cheap, which is cool. And then you have a downside here. At the end of your turn, if you have 5 or more cards in your hand, you discard your hand. And ultimately, draw 4 is solid. The question is, how bad is this downside? Obviously, losing your hand is not good, right? That's pretty bad. And also, if you're wondering if this works with the Slowbro, you probably aren't. This is probably something only I'm wondering or thinking about, because Slowbro is a cool card, but not a very good card, but it only works if you have no cards in your hand, or only does big damage if you have no cards in your hand. And this doesn't really work with that, because this is after you attack there. But regardless, this again is after you attack, including after you take prize cards. That's probably the biggest downside to this card. When you look at different decks in the Pokemon TCG, generally you're not going to end up with a large hand, outside of, I suppose, Alakazam. This is pretty bad in Alakazam. But honestly, most of these cards aren't particularly good in Alakazam, outside of one, which is actually kind of crazy. But Amarys is definitely it definitely has some downside if you are a deck with a big hand, but generally you don't need to have a big hand. And generally you can actually pare your hand down to something relatively small. Obviously, you can play a bunch of cards. You can even play something like Ultra Ball to discard more cards, and most of the time you'll be able to get your hand down pretty low. Additionally, there's not going to be really anything at the end of your turn where you're not sure if you're going to get down below this hand size. Theoretically, when you play, you don't necessarily know, and you are trying to get cards. Of course, you are getting cards to play, so hopefully you can play them quickly. On top of that, though, if you do go over, I mean, it's not good. It's definitely bad. The question is, how good are the cards that you're just not playing? And honestly, it will vary. There will be times when these cards that you're not playing are just not that useful, but there'll be times when they're like Recovery and Gust and Pokemon you need for later on that you can't play just yet, but most of the time you can play cards that you really need, and there are cards you just don't need for that particular matchup, or you already have enough pieces of that particular card. But regardless, you can often pare your hand down to a few cards below 5. Now, if you're taking a knockout or multiple prize cards, then you need to really think about this a bit more. This is where it gets a little sketchier. Obviously, if you take, well, if you, I was about to say, if you take 2 mega knockouts, then you would be over this, but you'd win. But if you take 5 prizes, then you will end up with 5 or more cards in your hand. So that's going to be, that's going to cause you to lose all the cards in your hand. But also, let's be honest, if you're taking 5 prizes, you're probably fine. So it doesn't matter too much. And if this is getting you there, then that's really nice. And if it's not getting you there, then theoretically, like you don't have to play this card. That is definitely a definitively bad downside. I've heard people say, for example, the supporter Avery, that card was a card that I didn't think was very good in certain very reasonable situations. And some people were like, you could just not play the card. But that's a very big downside, because then you're not, drawing the cards. So this card, in some situations, though, if you are taking a few prizes, notably if you're knocking out a Mega, it's going to be rough, I think. Megas aren't super common. I think you knock out a single prizer, you should be fine. Knock out a 2 prizer gets a little scarier, but should probably be okay most of the time. You need to get down to 2 cards in hand. I mean, I'm used to getting down to no cards in hand with Slowbro, but getting down to just one for like a mega knockout is going to be pretty rough. Ultimately, this is a little specific against certain decks, but it's decent. I don't think it's the best card ever. I'm not sitting here saying it. And also, ultimately, I'm talking a bunch about this card that's not super good, because you probably haven't really played with it. Again, I haven't really played with it too much either, but it is an interesting consideration there. Then we have the next card here. This one's definitely I don't know if it's the best. It's probably regarded as the best. I imagine Amarys is. I was going to say regarded as the worst. It's not really regarded as anything. But Gwen is a card new from Pitch Black. This card is pretty interesting, and it's similar to the old Roxy supporter, a decent supporter in the past, though, and also somewhat underrated one at that point as well. But what this card does is you discard up to 2 Pokemon from your hand that don't have rule boxes, and draw 3 cards for each Pokemon discard in this way. So you're able to draw actually kind of 4 cards. You get rid of 2 and you draw 6. So you're also drawing 4. Again, you still have another downside here. The downside isn't that you end up losing your whole hand, though. The downside is, one, you lose some Pokemon, which can be bad. To be honest, it's usually not too bad, though. You can recover them later. But on top of that, I mean, you probably just have extra Pokemon you need, more than you need to play in a game anyways, for like redundancy. This does need to really be in, obviously, a deck that plays a bunch of Pokemon, which most decks do, but specifically a single prize deck or a mostly single prize deck. But in a deck like that, where I think you're probably looking, I'd say for around 20 single prize Pokemon, this is pretty good, drawing you a bunch of cards. If you don't have the Pokemon in your hands, which could potentially be the sign that you don't have a good hand, which is when you need a draw supporter, then this is a little sketchy. I don't think this card's broken. Also, I do want to mention this card. Well, one, it's actually, this is the card that I was mentioning that is good in Alexia, increasing your hand size by 4 there, which is very good and not losing your whole hand like Amarys. So that's kind of cool. And you also run a ton of single prize Pokemon there with the Alakazam line, the Dunsparce line, and maybe some other stuff we see. And then there's also hide and seek. It's pretty good in hide and seek as well. I played some with hide and seek. I still need to play it a little bit more, but I do think it is pretty good and presumably worth running in that deck. Though again, you do need these single prize Pokemon in the deck as well, right? Otherwise, when I say a single prize, you need like a bunch, right? You need to be playing a solid hide and sneak package with probably some support engine as well. But Gwen is pretty good just in general for drawing you cards. Again, it doesn't work in literally every deck, but works in most decks. On top of that, um, the cost isn't too bad. I think this card, I don't think it's underrated or overrated. I think it's probably, or it might be slightly underrated. It's definitely a card that people kind of are aware of, and I think if people are kind of playing, so they're a bit of aware of it. I think in a month from now, it will probably go back to being underrated again. But it's a good supporter. I think it's the best card from Pitch Black in my opinion. I don't remember all the cards off the top of my head from the set, but it's definitely pretty good, and I've been pretty happy playing with it so far. Then we have the next supporter. This is Explorer's Guidance. If you know me and you know my channel, you know I love this card. And if you don't know me and know my channel, you should subscribe so you don't miss my other content because I have some awesome content on some other cards. But Explorer's Guidance here lets you look at the top 6 cards of your deck, then you put 2 of them into your hand and you discard the others. This is another card that discards. So like Gwen, if you have discard synergy, then Explorer's Guidance is really good with that at times because you can essentially get more than 2 cards because some you want just to discard anyways, which is nice. Or say discard synergy, Gwen would be discarding a certain Pokemon, but then Explorer's Guidance works with like Serial GX or honestly, it's synergy with Night Stretcher is really nice and really fun. Something that I'd highly recommend you try out. It's something I've been doing playing for Explorer's Guidance and for Night Stretcher in a reasonable chunk of decks, and it feels really solid there. This is currently, it actually might be my most played supporter right now. I don't know. It's that or Lilies, and then I've been playing Boss as well a bunch, but it's those 3. Those are the ones I'm playing the most right now. I guess also Judge I've been playing. But in terms of draw, Explorer's Guidance is just really up there because it's just able to see 6 cards into the deck. This is the same amount that Lily sees into the deck in the situation in which you've taken some prizes, where it's still a pretty solid supporter. And it's a little bit less than with Lily's if you have not taken any prizes. It is 2 less, which is very meaningful. That being said, Liz also shuffles your hand to your deck. This means 1, you could end up seeing the same cards again, so you're not seeing new cards there. And 2, you also lose your hand, right? You don't like permanently lose your hand with Liz, but you temporarily lose your hand. It's not in the discard, but it is in your deck. It goes away. So that is definitely something that is potentially, I mean, it's a downside, right? Obviously, it'd be way better if it just drew 6 or drew 8. It would be completely broken. Liz is arguably still kind of broken, but you do lose your hand with Liz. This you don't lose your hand, which again is very meaningful there. Then we also see that it does discard your cards. This can be bad, obviously. This is the thing that scares people. Also, it does only get 2 cards. To be honest, I think people, getting cards is really nice, but sometimes people overvalue an individual card that is like, not super good, one that you just don't need that much. Like with Zero Ex Machinations, that card is, I mean, it's a card that usually forces your opponent to discard cards that they don't really need. People feel like they want their cards, and let's be honest, who doesn't want their cards? But you don't need them all the time. But regardless, we have this, which does make you be a little more careful with your resources, but it does discard in some ways some random cards. There are times you really need to take 2 cards, and you have to get rid of one that you want for later. There are also times when you hit a bunch of good cards. So long story short, you can end up discarding some good stuff sometimes, but it's nowhere near as much as you might think. It's definitely very manageable. And again, you do see 6 cards into your deck and get to still keep your hand. It's honestly a really solid supporter, one that I've been playing a lot recently and I've been super happy with. It's been played a little bit, certainly, but it's not been played that much. I will mention it was played previously with Ancient Synergies. That's pretty much out of the game at this point, but that is worth noting. Since rotation of those, though, this card has really fallen off, I think, and is honestly a card I've just been like so in love with. I think it is, out of all these options, is the one I'd recommend playing the most. I've talked about it a lot in the past, so if you want more info, you can check out those videos, and I probably will make one in the future, unless I start deciding that I like finding this card not good. But I doubt that. It's felt really good so far, and it really makes sense that it feels good because it sees a bunch of cards, it gets you a few cards, and it's just good. We have the last two cards here. We have Iris's Fighting Spirit next, and I guess I'll just talk about the next one as well, Morty's Conviction. These both require you to discard another card from your hand. Morty's Conviction draws a card, feature points bench Pokemon. This is played, funnily enough, in a lot of. It tends to be played more so in Japanese lists than international lists. I don't think there's necessarily a specific reason. It's just something I have noticed. Iris's Fighting Spirit is a card as well that is somewhat similar. Again, not played too much, but it's played a little bit. And this one says you draw until you have 6 cards in hand. These are actually pretty different. Iris's Fighting Spirit is a card I haven't played with too much either, to be honest. I was gonna say new, it's not like that new. What it does though is it allows you to just draw a bunch of cards in some ways similar to Lily's. I mean, you're going to be drawing less cards than Lily's, but you do get to keep your hand if you have cards in your hand. If you don't have cards in your hand, it's kind of similar to Lily's. So I'm not saying this card is better than Lily's. This one, I'd say, has the probably most mediocre upside. If you already have a hand, especially a clogged hand, it's pretty bad. But if you have a handful of good stuff, then you already have the good stuff, and that's fine. You don't need this. And if you don't really have much of anything, it's really good. So theoretically, it helps you in those bad situations more than it helps you when you don't need it as much, which is nice there. We also see discard synergy. Technically, I don't think it's amazingly strong with either Iris's or Morty's. I definitely play as far as guidance over both of these, and I'd probably play Gwen over them, though obviously it depends what you're trying to discard. Morty's Conviction, drawing one feature points bench Pokemon, can be nice for growing your hand. This is something I've seen in something like Alexam. Technically, if your opponent has 5 bench Pokemon, you are down 2 cards, you go up 5 cards, so then that's going to, or you get 5 cards, so then that's a positive 3 hand size increase, which is pretty nice. They're the same as Amarys, and also the same as Gwen as well. So that is pretty nice. It's not, again, broken, but it is good. Obviously, your opponent won't have that many bench Pokemon in play some of the time. If they always had 5, this would be really good. Discard 1, draw 5 would be, legitimately really, really awesome. Obviously, they don't. There are times in the early game when you're trying to set up, when they're also trying to set up, when it doesn't do too much. Ultimately, this is, I think, the weakest of the cards on this list, and maybe this or Amarys, but there definitely, obviously, are times when this is really good. Also, I didn't even mention this yet, but with the Stadium Era Zero Underdepths, you're able to then draw even more cards if your opponent has an even bigger bench, which is cool. To be honest, you don't really need to draw too many more than 5, but you're certainly not going to be complaining either. This card, and it's just like a solid draw supporter sometimes, and there are also times when it doesn't really do much of anything at all. But overall, I think it's interesting and definitely one worth considering. I know, as I said, there's some people who really like this card, and yeah, I mean, it's an interesting card, not a bad card either. But anyways, tell me your thoughts on these cards in the comment section, and while you're down there, make sure you like and subscribe because it really does help support me in the channel. Also, huge shouts to my YouTube members supporting me in the channel, because again, that all really means a ton. But I hope you all enjoyed. Make sure you do all the good stuff down below in the comment section, that stuff. I hope you all enjoyed. As always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.